I'd like to invite Mr. Vance Martin for his session next. Now, Mr. Vance Martin is an internationally renowned nature conservationist and former president of the Wild Foundation, Boulder, Colorado. Vance is an expert in international nature conservation and wilderness protection and a writer as well. Vance has worked in more than 65 countries, and he specializes in bridging the interest of people and nature through culture, communications, science, and policy. And since 1983, he served as president of the Wild Foundation. And today, Vance will be speaking on the Conservation Today, a global perspective and a snapshot. Please welcome Vance Martin.
Well, I stand one person shy of the ending of a very good and productive day. I have a few remarks to make, then we'll see a little video. I'd like to say to begin, thank you all for coming. It's not easy to give up time on your day to come and sit all day, and I really appreciate it. Thank you.
And I must say we have more than 255 online attendees.
Yeah, online.
At the moment.
Yo, online, okay. I also would like to just begin by saying that I have had the honor of working all over the world for over 50 years. I think I even beat Sukumar's mark. Mine's 55 or something. And I often experience that the best wildlife wilderness conservation is done by volunteers. And I've met a lot of them, and I've been impressed. But I have not been impressed by anybody more than Dr. Tarun Chhabra. Thank you, Tarun. There's been a lot of talk today about protected areas, how much 30%, is it a national park? We've got to get the people out, fortress conservation. I'm going to offer a slightly broader perspective that includes the whole thing, but wild nature supports us. We all know this. Have you ever asked yourself the question, how much is enough? It's a very simple question. Nature produces life support. They call it ecological services. Well, just how much of it do we need before we start going the other way, right? And this is one of the big global questions, has been for a long time, and recently it's come up with this 30 by 30. I've never particularly liked that. It sounds a bit like a jingle to me. But interestingly enough, science has evolved enough now, looking at different ecosystems, to say essentially that nature needs half. That given the ecosystem, in order to function to provide life support for us and all the rest of the life on Earth, given a system, it could be 40%, it could be, the Amazon is more, almost 80. So let's call it half. I don't call it 50%. I call it half. So that's science. How about a personal view? We developed another approach to how much do we need by working with our indigenous brothers and sisters and said, what do you think? And inevitably the answer came back, it's all about reciprocity. It's all about giving back to that which gives to you. 50%, whatever. Act in reciprocity with what gives to you. In Western terms, I would call that relationship, building relationship. Everybody here has been in a successful and an unsuccessful relationship. And you know what it takes to fail a relationship. Too much taking, too much taking. So, reciprocity. Create a relationship with that which is important, and if you want it to survive, you give to it. So 30 by 30, it's fine. We set up this Nature Needs Half thing some years ago. We submitted it to the IUCN in 2010, and we said, you know, this is what we think it should be. It shouldn't be 10%. It should be about half. Well, we got I'm quite involved in the IUCN. We got an email back from a not-to-be-named person, a good friend of mine, that said, well, you know, half might be right, but we can't say it because we will be laughed at. So that's what we were and often still are basing our life survival prospects on. I don't want to lose face. It sounds crazy to save half the earth. It sounds crazy also to kill yourself, slowly and surely. So how are we going to get there? I have a little saying, protect the wild that's left and rewild the rest, okay? Why protect the wild that's left? Is that because if we want to address climate change and stop the extinction species, the single most effective, cost-efficient way to do it is don't destroy wild nature. Wild nature is doing it at no cost all the time. So we want to destroy it, and then at some point, maybe if we're smart enough, rebuild it. Go figure. That's about protecting. What about rewilding? You know, we had planned, as many of you know, Wild 11 in Jaipur for March 2020. Well, we all know what happened in March 2020. After working for 2 years and spending $1 million, we canceled Wild 11. So what was the success that came out of that cancellation? One of the things was that we had developed something called the Global Charter for Rewilding the Earth. And it was the principles of rewilding. And it wasn't a practitioner's manual. That has all come out. Out of that, very quickly came the Global Rewilding Alliance, which is now a Swiss association, nonprofit. They asked me to chair it. We have 125 members without advertising. Rewilding is happening everywhere. And to me, it's the most hopeful, incredibly cool thing going on Earth. A few examples right here in India. There's just tons of it going on. One of my favorites is a small one. It's Pradeep Krishan, whom many of you know, wrote Trees of Delhi and all of that, a really fine man. He took on a very small area in Rajasthan, and he looked at the soils, and he's not a trained ecologist. He got all the invasives out and then just looked at the soils and began to plant. And today it's this beautiful, incredible visitor center, all native grasses, regenerated on its own. Urban rewilding in Gurgaon near Delhi, a group of people got together and totally took on an old mining site. And they did it through community, all volunteers, right? And now they have this great biodiversity reserve there. And they've now done this to 4 or 5 other urban sites. So, I mean, and there's so many more of them. On the global scene, some of the ones that really inspire me are the Tompkins conservation work in Chile and Argentina. This is scale, this is big time scale. And they've reintroduced, they bought a lot of land, leveraged it with government, created 15 new national parks, both marine and terrestrial, 30 million hectares of marine areas on the coast protected. All of this without moving anybody against their consent. Peace Parks Foundation across Southern Africa, I'm very active on their board. We've reintroduced wildlife, 25,000 animals over the last 5 years across many different parks that span borders. We've had many communities have moved, not one person involuntarily. It takes time, it takes negotiation. I didn't say that what happened after we put in that suggestion to the IUCN that what the real policy should be is nature needs half. We resubmitted it 2 years ago in Marseille at the big convention, and it was passed by 87% positive vote. And the first active part of the motion said science recognizes that we need to protect half. The second part of it says, and you protect half only by following the principles of UNDRIP, the United Nations Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous People. There is no separation between conservation and local people. It takes time, it takes patience, it takes a lot of love, but it is possible. So I'm just going to end now by saying that one of the things we're concentrating on in the Global Rewilding Alliance, at least the Secretariat is a concept that is not included in any of the climate models, right? All these computer models about tons of carbon, gigatons being sequestered, and what we need and how short we are, and if we don't make up that gap, etc. These are the climate models. Not one of them includes the carbon sequestration, carbon drawdown activities of wildlife. It's incredible. So Professor Oz Schmidt at Yale, we started working with him several years ago, and he developed a concept called animating the carbon cycle. What a cool word, animating. So we're going to close with just a 3-minute video about animating the carbon cycle. And I'm going to end my little bit by one of my favorite quotes. And it's about humility. And it's about respect. And it's about love. Everybody here like U2? Sonny? You know, Bono sings. You know, one of their best songs is called Mysterious Ways. And sometimes when I look at nature, she's very, very mysterious. We've got a line in that song that says, if you want to touch the sky, you got to learn how to kneel. Get on your knees, boy. Thank you. Let's show the video.
Earth breathes carbon. With every breath, its oceans, forests, and wildlife absorb carbon from the atmosphere. Animals are the missing link between biodiversity and the climate, and they've been neglected. Like an enormous sponge, forest and the ocean soak up vast amount of carbon. You may think vegetation is the king of carbon inhalation, but it's not quite so simple. The exchange of carbon is dynamic, flowing effortlessly across the web of life. An intimate relationship exists between carbon and biodiversity. All animals are climate heroes. Take, for example, the gnu. The gnu, otherwise known as the wildebeest. Over 1 million of them used to roam the Great Serengeti, trampling and grazing the grassland, returning carbon-rich plant matter to the soil, until one day, people introduced cattle. These farm animals introduced disease that wiped out 75% of the wildebeest population. The after effects were catastrophic. The once grazed grass now grew tall and wild, inviting fires that tore through the landscape, ravaging 80% of the ecosystem and creating a large source of CO2 emissions every year. Through years of conservation work, wildebeest have returned. The relationship has been restored and the Serengeti is now a carbon sink. It absorbs more carbon than it releases, enough to offset emissions in both Kenya and Tanzania. 1,000 miles away in cool ocean waters, a whale cruises through the light zone. Like other whales, she excretes valuable nutrients at the surface before diving down to feed. The phytoplankton benefit from her waste, using it to photosynthesize and absorb carbon. When these tiny creatures die, they sink to the ocean floor, safely storing the carbon. If we help replenish whale population, they could take up 450 million tons of carbon. That's equal to the annual emissions of more than entire Africa. Animate means bring to life. Rewilding reanimates the carbon cycle. It's a solution that works with nature to decrease carbon levels and regulate the climate. Our survival depends on the survival of wild animals, a fact indigenous communities have known for millennia, and the reason why they are key partners in the effort to rewild the natural world. We must work with nature to solve the crisis we face. Nature is our ally. It's time to rewild. It's time to animate.
Thank you so much, Vance. Firstly, thank you so much for coming all the way from Boulder, Colorado, and making my father's 100th birth anniversary celebrations so, so special. And you've been a dear, dear friend working towards conservation in wildlife and nature for what, over 5-6 decades together. So it's absolutely been wonderful. Vance, what I wanted to check with you is like, there's been so many different points of view that we've heard today. Now we're hearing another point of view, another word called wild and rewilding, right? So what do you think the message of rewilding is actually? I mean, what is the core message of rewilding?
Very simple. People need a positive answer. People need to have hope. There's nothing more positive and more hopeful than bringing nature back. It not only serves the ecological support services, it serves our heart. In the process of bringing nature back, we are rewilding ourselves. We are creating a relationship with Mother Nature of reciprocity. So I have 3 words for rewilding. Overarching, positive. 3 subsets. It's for health. It's for heritage, because every bone in our body has the wild gene. We come from wilderness. And the last one is hope. We need hope, and rewilding brings us hope.
Anyway, thank you so much for that lovely video, Vance, and for being here.